One point that I think I would like to address is the importance in, and I've touched on it, the importance in talking about not just our grief, but talking about death. You know, death is always the elephant in the room. We don't talk about it. The death of a child, forget it. You know, in the early days, I lived in a very small community, and while they were incredibly supportive and uplifting in so many ways, I also had the experience of walking through my village and there inexplicably being nobody on the streets because they were literally they'd all run into shops because they were frightened to encounter me, because they were frightened of my grief. I've also had the experience of being in a supermarket and seeing somebody I know, my young son, sort of calling out to them, and they literally running down the supermarket aisle to escape us. And it's not because they're unkind people, it's because they just don't know how to deal with it. And they think that they need to have something to say that will help. And actually the most helpful thing you can say to anyone who is bereaved is, "I'm so sorry, and I just don't know what to say to you." You know, if people say that, it's there, you've put it on the table and you've addressed it. Very enlightened people, you know, have said to me, you know, I'm so sorry for your loss. What was your daughter's name? You know, these things come with perhaps a more enlightened set of beliefs, or just an inherent ability to empathise with a bereaved person. Perhaps that person has experienced that themselves. But I think generally, as a society, and dare I say as a country, we are quite repressed when it comes to death. You look at countries like Mexico, who have a whole, you know, Dia del Muerte, they have a whole Day of the Dead. You know, they foster this idea that we have this connection with another realm, that our loved ones exist, they continue to exist somewhere. And I think that's healthy, to sort of celebrate it. I know that sounds odd, but you know, anything other than just not talk about it, to me, that was just dreadful, because at one point I was in a really dark place, and then, you know, people want to shovel you off to counselling, you know, which can be very helpful in its own way. But I did have a period of time where I just thought, I don't want to talk to a counsellor. I just want to be able to talk about my daughter and refer to how I feel, or talk about something that she did without people, you know, people bursting into tears. You end up then having to manage their emotions, and that's not their fault. But I do feel that if as a society it was more normalised, we would be getting somewhere. I mean, there are a couple of movements. There's a movement I want to mention called death doulas, end-of-life midwives. That's becoming more and more known these days. A lady called Felicity Warner initiated that, oh gosh, probably over a decade ago now. I've worked as a birth doula myself, and this lady really worked on the idea that in times past, a midwife in a village was the wise woman in the village, and not only would she help usher in new life, she would also sit with people as they passed. And she took that idea and she started to train people in the art of sitting with somebody who is dying, and then counselling the grieving afterwards, and sitting with the grieving. You know, the Jewish religion sit shiva. You know, there's other groups understand this, and I feel that there is a lack of understanding, certainly where I come from. And then there's also something called the Death Cafe. It's genius. It's basically, it's advertised in different areas. It's like a little network. They're worldwide now, and it's the idea that a poster goes up, people turn up to a specified venue, and they sit and talk about death. You might have a terminal illness, you might have just lost someone close to you, you might just be curious, but you turn up and it's a place where you can just discuss it with other people over tea and cake, which is very British. But yeah, I think that's a really important message for me, based on my experiences, and I think, you know, we need to talk about it and feel that it's okay to talk about it amongst ourselves and to the recently bereaved, because in that way we can move forwards, we can all move forwards.